Welcome to the 9th annual Lapham's Quarterly Decades Ball. Its theme this evening, What is History? Broadcasting from the Rubin Museum of Art in New York City. Our Master of Ceremonies this evening is Simon Winchester, author of The Professor and the Madman, Krakatoa, and, most recently, Land, How the Hunger for Ownership Shaped the Modern World. Please welcome Simon Winchester.
Good evening once again. Good evening. Good evening. And first of all, I want to look straight ahead at the camera and welcome our online audience that has just joined us via live stream, presumably from all over the world. So I'm thrilled, we're thrilled, that you're here for the annual Decades Ball, which supports Lapham's Quarterly, the remarkable magazine, public-spirited not-for-profit that depends on donations to continue to exist and doing as well as it continues to do. And this is our annual fundraiser. So all of you out there in cyberspace, thank you. So let's first of all, and I've got a long list of people to thank, so it's going to be like the beginning of Masterpiece Theatre. And I hope, as I get onto the complicated bit, you'll forgive me. I'm an English person, and most of the names that I'm familiar with are Smith and Robinson and Pringle and so forth, but there are some really complicated names. So I'll try not to mangle anybody's name, but if I do, do not tear up your check, please. So first of all, let's give thanks to those who have made this event possible, beginning with our wonderful gala chairs, Hilaria and Alec Baldwin, Lisa and Christopher Lloyd, and Deb, and I must make special mention of Deb before I get on to her husband. Deb arranged essentially the food that we're eating tonight, and it's all monumentally important, historically important, and delicious. So Deb, please thank her, and also her husband, Bill Ryan. So thank you, Jazz, for helping with the ticket sales, arranging tonight's talent, planning the menu, that's the point I was trying to make, securing sponsorship, and so much more. Now here's the bit which I have to do these names. The Decades Ball Benefit Committee gave early and essential support and makes this event possible. So we give thanks to our Benefit Committee members. They are Mary Stewart Hammond Allen, Melissa Ballat. There we are. I knew I'd get someone wrong. Please keep your check. Do not tear it up. Tracy Bollag, Kathy Robbins and Richard Cohen, old friends, so no problems there. Jessica Hairston and Andrew M. Davenport. Jackie and Nick Drexel. Edward J. Epstein. Barbara Fleischman. Francis M. Flynn. Agnes Gund. Judith Gurevich. Lucy Hamilton. The Hendra family. Linda Karshan, Lisa Atkin and Tony Kaiser, who I know, Carmela R. Kletjian, Shelley Ambrose and Douglas Knight, Yippee, Jennifer and Winston Lapham, Monica and Raymond A. Lamontagne, Rachel Lenrow, Wynne McCormack, Stacey Hadash and Terry McDonnell, Diane and Tom McGrath. So glad I got it right. Kim Miller, Alan Patrikoff, brilliant, so evidently right there too. Now John Postley, I think it is, rather than Postley anyway. Mr. Postley, thank you. Where are we? Diana Prince, Elizabeth Lizette Prince, Donna and Benjamin A. Rosen, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, Inc. This is where it starts like Channel 13. Sarah and David R. Stack, Maggie and Amor Towles, Christy and Ron Ulrich, Dr. Samuel Waxel, who I know of old, Jane and Brian Williams, and Setsko Winchester, and me. So, please join me also in thanking our sponsor, Bookshop, the online bookstore with a mission to financially support local and independent bookstores. There's no longer any need to buy your books on Amazon. Go instead to bookshop.org, bookshop.org, and you'll see how easy it is to support your local bookstore when you buy books online. I also want to thank the sponsors of the live stream of tonight's event. These include the Nguyen Coffee Supply, Marjoram, I hope a soft G is appropriate, Marjoram Wine Company, Choc Zero, and Tea Drunk. I never thought I'd ever say that word, but Tea Drunk is apparently a company, and jolly generous they are. So thank you to all of you. So the final bit of pitch is many of our online attendees have given generously already to support the Decades Ball. If you're watching this live stream at home and haven't yet donated, please consider doing so. On watching this live stream, on Crowdcast, you can click the donate button, and I'd like to be like when late night television go like that and say it's at the bottom of your screen. So somewhere at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that allows you to support. But if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, click the link, and I know that's a bit in blue at the bottom of the screen, in the event description to contribute. Now, that wasn't difficult, but it was necessary. This, however, is more fun. Now we get on to the entertainment. The biographies of our performers tonight appear in your programme. They're a distinguished group of people, and they hardly need introduction. So I won't burden you throughout the evening with their myriad achievements and credits. We begin the programme with two answers to the question that is fundamental to this evening: what is history? The first comes from Voltaire, from a contribution to Diderot, Denis Diderot, the Encyclopédie, the first real encyclopedia in the world, volume 8, which was published in Paris in 1765. And the second answer comes from Jacob Burckhardt, the Swiss historian and historiographer. So reading both texts, I assume the first one is not in French, but we will know in a few seconds, is the unbelievably talented, it could therefore be in French, actor, author, comedian, director, and producer, Bob Balaban.
I began by coming in the wrong way. How auspicious. So I'm starting with Voltaire's contribution to the Encyclopédie under the entry for history. History is the narrative of facts presented as true, in contrast to the fable, which is the recitation of facts presented as false. There's the history of opinions, which is hardly other than the collection of human errors. The history of the arts, perhaps the most useful of all, when it is joined to the knowledge of inventions and the progress of the arts, and which is the description of their mechanism, natural history, inappropriately termed history, and which is an essential part of physics. The basic foundations of all history are the stories recounted by parents to their children and subsequently transmitted from one generation to the next. They are merely probable in their origins and lose a degree of probability with each succeeding generation. Over time, the fable grows and the truth is lost. Hence, the origins of all peoples are absurd. Thus, the Egyptians were governed by the gods for many centuries, then by demigods, and finally they had kings who ruled them for 11,340 years. The sun in this period of time had changed where it rose in the east and set in the west 4 times. In the shadows of history, nothing is known except that there were vast empires that lasted a very long time, that there were tyrants whose power was based on public misery, that tyranny was so extensive that it reached the point of stripping men of their virility to use them for infamous pleasures, starting at the end of their childhood, and to employ them in their old age to guard women, that superstition governed men, that a dream was regarded as a sign from above, and that the world would govern peace and war, etc. The art of writing history very well will always be rare. It is well known that one must have a grave, pure, varied, agreeable style. There are laws for writing history, just as there are laws for all the arts of the mind. There are many precepts, and yet so few great artists. Next, we move to historian Jacob Burckhardt. Now, among all the fields of learning in the world, there prevails, like a fundamental chord that keeps sounding through, the history of the ancient world, i.e. of all those peoples whose lives have flowed into ours. Now, it would be idle to assume that after 4 centuries of humanism, everything had been learned from the ancient world. All experiences and data had been used, and there were no longer anything to be gained there, so one could content oneself with a knowledge of more modern times, or possibly make a pitying or reluctant study of the Middle Ages and spend the time saved on more useful things. We shall never be rid of antiquity as long as we do not become barbarians again. Barbarians and modern American men of culture live without consciousness of history. In our problematical and wonderful existence, we cling involuntarily to the knowledge of man as such, of mankind, empirical, as we meet it in life, and as it is revealed by history. The contemplation of nature does not suffice us, does not console or instruct us enough. And here we must not seal ourselves off from anything past. We must leave no gaps. Only the whole speaks to us in all centuries that have left us records. Are the 3 great ages of the world perhaps like the 3 times of day in the riddle of the Sphinx? They are, rather a continual transmission of acting and suffering man through countless incarnations. A genuine inquiry will want to recognize all these mutations and abandon any partiality for specific ages. It is all right to have a predilection, for that is a matter of taste. And it will do this all the sooner the livelier the feeling for human inadequacy in general is. Once it's understood that there never were, never will be any happy golden ages in a fanciful sense, one will remain free from the foolish over-evaluation of some past, some senseless despair of the present, or fatuous hope for the future. But one will recognize in the contemplation of historical ages one of the most noble undertakings. It is the story of life and the suffering of mankind viewed as a whole. And that's history.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was terrific. Thank you. You'll hear more about golden ages in a few minutes, but not immediately, because this is a change from the printed program. We often read history in the hope of understanding what might come next. That's sort of axiomatic. Our next reading, and here we are deviating from your printed program, is by Dorothy Thompson, asking in 1941, "Who goes Nazi?" Thompson was the first American journalist to be expelled from Germany after the rise of the Nazi Party. She came back to the United States and began writing a popular newspaper column, and in 1939 she was named second on Time's list of America's most influential women. Eleanor Roosevelt came in first. So reading the selection is actor and singer-songwriter Reeve Carney, who many of you will know from the Broadway production of Hadestown. Reeve, Carney, please.
It is an interesting and somewhat macabre parlor game to play at a large gathering like this, to speculate who in a showdown would go Nazi. By now I think I know. I've gone through the experience many times in Germany, in Austria, and in France. I've come to know the types, the born Nazis, the Nazis whom democracy itself has created, the certain to be fellow travelers. And I also know those who never, under any conceivable circumstances, would become Nazis. At any rate, let us look around the room. I think young D over there is the only born Nazi in the room. Young D is the spoiled only son of a doting mother. He has never been crossed in his life. He spends his time at the game of seeing what he can get away with. He is constantly arrested for speeding, and his mother pays the fines. He has been ruthless towards 2 wives, and his mother pays the alimony. His life is spent in sensation-seeking and theatricality. He is utterly inconsiderate of everybody. He is very good-looking in a vacuous, cavalier way, and inordinately vain. He would certainly fancy himself in a uniform that gave him a chance to swagger and lord it over others. H, on the other side of this room, is an historian. He is American of Dutch ancestry, born and reared in the Middle West. He has been in love with America all his life. He can recite whole chapters of Thoreau, volumes of American poetry. He knows Jefferson's letters, Hamilton's papers, Lincoln's speeches. He is a collector of early American furniture, lives in New England, runs a farm for a hobby and doesn't lose much money on it, and loathes parties like this one. He has a ribald and manly sense of humor, is unconventional, and lost a college professorship because of a love affair. Afterward, he married the lady and lived happily ever after as the wages of sin. H has never doubted his own authentic Americanism for one instant. This is his country. His ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War and in all wars since. He is certainly an intellectual, but an intellectual smelling slightly of cow barns and damp tweeds. He is the most good-natured and genial man alive, but if anyone ever tries to take this country over, make it into an imitation of Hitler's, Mussolini's, or Pétain's systems, H will grab a gun and fight. It is his secret conviction that nobody whose ancestors have not been in this country since before the Civil War really understands America or would really fight for it against Nazism or any other foreignism in a showdown. But H is wrong. There is one other person in the room who would fight alongside H, and he is not even an American citizen. He is a young German emigre whom I brought along to the party. The people in the room look at him rather askance because he's so Germanic, so very blonde-haired, so very blue-eyed, so tanned that somehow you expect him to be wearing shorts. He looks like the model of a Nazi. His English is flawed. He learned it only 5 years ago. He comes from an old East Prussian family. All his German friends went Nazi without exception. He has devoured volumes of American history, knows Whitman by heart, wonders why so few Americans have ever really read the Federalist Papers, believes in the United States of Europe, the union of the English-speaking world, and the coming democratic revolution all over the earth. He believes that America is the country of creative evolution. Once it shakes off its middle-class complacency, its bureaucratized, I'm not pronouncing this right, bureaucratized industry. There we go. The first time was closest. Bureaucratized industry. Thank you. There was a little staple here, so I'm going to start that sentence again to give it a fair shot. He believes that America is the people in this room think he is not an American, but he is more American than almost any of them. He has discovered America, and his spirit is the spirit of the pioneers. He is furious with America because it does not realize its strength and beauty and power.
Well, I think we now realize that Dorothy Thompson was the second most admired woman in America because she introduced words like bureaucratized into the English language. So, Reeve, congratulations for getting your way through it, and fie on her not being number one. I make sure, yes, I've found my place. So, Lapham's Quarterly is published with the conviction that historical consciousness is essential for making our way in the world. That's the sort of thing we've been saying all evening. But the study of history is not without its detractors. Our next performer takes up 3 short passages that place footnotes, if you like, critical footnotes of various kinds on the writing and the reading of history. So reading Aristotle, Du Fu, and Finley Peter Dunne is Richard Kind, a hilarious and amazingly versatile actor. Oh, good.
Before I begin, may I say what an honor it is to be here. Just my presence here proves to my children that I have a modicum of intelligence. We start circa 335 BC, Athens, with Aristotle on why poetry is better than history. It is not the function of the poet to relate what has happened, but what may happen, what is possible according to the law of probability or necessity. The poet and the historian differ not by writing in verse or in prose. The work of the historian, Herodotus, might be put into verse, and it would still be a species of history with meter, no less than without it. The true difference is that one relates what has happened, the other what may happen. Express the universal, history, the particular. By the universal, I mean how a person of a certain type will, on occasion, speak or act according to the law of probability or necessity. And it is this universality at which poetry aims in the names she attaches to the personages. The particular is what history is limited to, what the statesman, orator, and General Alcibiades did or suffered, and nothing more. What is possible is credible. What has not happened, we do not at once feel sure to be possible. But what has happened is manifestly possible. Otherwise, it would not have happened. We now go circa the year 759, Guizhou, China. The Chinese poet and politician, and thank you for saying his name because I didn't know, Du Fu, on how small history is compared to the power of nature. Beneath long pine winds, streams twist. Gray rats scuttle among ancient roof tiles. I don't know whose palace this once was, bequeathed beneath isolate cliffs to ruin. Its dark rooms flooded with blue ghost flame, its manicured paths washed away. Earth's 10,000 sounds are the true music. Autumn colors couldn't care less about exquisite women, their rouge and mascara sham that graced gold carriages. Nothing but brown earth now. Of those regal affairs, only a stone horse remains. Sitting grief-stricken in wild grass, I sing wildly, wiping away tears. Here amid this sprawling journey of history's unfurling, what would a rich and long life even be? Finally, 1902, Chicago. American humorist Finley Peter Dunne on why history can't be true. I know history isn't true, because it ain't like what I see every day on Halsted Street in Chicago. If anyone comes along with a history of Greece or Rome that will show me the people fighting, getting drunk, making love, getting married, owing the grocery man, and being without hard coal, then I'll believe there was a Greece or Rome, but not before. Historians are like doctors. They're always looking for symptoms. Those of them that write about their own time examines their tongues, feels the pulse, and makes a wrong diagnosis. The other kind of history is a post-mortem examination. It tells you what a country died of, but I'd like to know what it lived of.
Well, that was marvelous. But I think to hear Aristotle pronounced in the accent of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, is just terrific. So thank you, Richard. That was just lovely. Now, another departure from our printed program, so don't rely too much on the printed word here. So I'm delighted to introduce the actor Morgan Spector, who's going to read a passage from Will and Ariel Durant's The Lessons of History. Will and Ariel Durant, just 1 second. I know you're straining at the leash, you want to go. Will and Ariel Durant, I don't know if anyone has ever read any of their 10 volumes, which you used to get free. I remember if you joined the Book of the Month Club. Hundreds of people all over America have these 10 read volumes, utterly unread. So this is a real treat that we're going to hear some of it read to us. Their work, well, it actually says it's an 11-volume work, titled The Story of Civilization. While writing their massive work, the authors, in their words, made note of events and comments that might illuminate present affairs, future probabilities, the nature of man, and the conduct of states. They published these notes as The Lessons of History in 1968, after the publication of their 10th volume. I know many of you have been gripped for the last few months watching Julian Fellowes' new series, The Gilded Age, on HBO. That's right. So for watchers of this series, Morgan Spector will need no introduction because he stars as the ruthlessly ambitious railroad magnate George Russell. But he also delivers many other memorable performances on TV, film, and the stage. So please welcome Morgan Spector.
Such a lovely introduction. Thank you. Consider education not as the painful accumulation of facts and dates and reigns, nor merely the necessary preparation of the individual to earn his keep in the world, but as the transmission of our mental, moral, technical, and aesthetic heritage as fully as possible to as many as possible for the enlargement of man's understanding, control, embellishment, and enjoyment of life. The heritage that we can now more fully transmit is richer than ever before. It is richer than that of Pericles, for it includes all the Greek flowering that followed him. Richer than Leonardo's, for it includes him and the Italian Renaissance. Richer than Voltaire's, for it embraces all the French Enlightenment and its ecumenical dissemination. If progress is real, despite our whining, it is not because we are born any healthier, better, or wiser than infants were in the past, but because we are born to a richer heritage, born on a higher level of that pedestal which the accumulation of knowledge and art raises as the ground and support of our being. The heritage rises, and man rises in proportion as he receives it. History is, above all else, the creation and recording of that heritage. Progress is its increasing abundance, preservation, transmission, and use. To those of us who study history not merely as a warning and reminder of man's follies and crimes, but also as an encouraging remembrance of generative souls, the past ceases to be a depressing chamber of horrors. It becomes a celestial city. a spacious country of the mind, wherein 1,000 saints, statesmen, inventors, scientists, poets, artists, musicians, lovers, and philosophers still love and speak, teach and carve and sing. The historian will not mourn because he can see no meaning in human existence except that which man puts into it. Let it be our pride that we ourselves may put meaning into our lives, and sometimes a significance that transcends death. If a man is fortunate, he will, before he dies, father up as much as he can of his civilized heritage and transmit it to his children. And to his final breath, he will be grateful for this inexhaustible legacy, knowing that it is our nourishing mother and our lasting life.
Good evening. My name is Richard Cohen. Not that that's very unusual in this city. When I first came to New York in 1999, I was invited to a party where only people called Richard Cohen could attend. It's the only time I've been at a large gathering where I knew everybody's name. I've also been invited to the Lapham's quarterly party, having joined the editorial board in 2011, 11 years ago. And now it's my great honour and great pleasure to introduce tonight's winner of the Janus Prize, or if you went to Oxford University, the Janus Prize, Dame Hilary Mantel, for her contribution to our understanding of the past. I've known Hilary, Dame Hilary, for almost exactly 20 years. In 2002, my first book was published, A History of Swordplay Through the Ages, Duels, Samurai Warriors, Olympic Fencing Scandals, and so on. Simon Winchester told me he was delighted to read that of all the non-human animals in the world, only one can be taught to fence: elephants. That Christmas, I was surprised to see in a seasonal roundup in The Spectator that Hilary Mantel, as she then was, had chosen my book for special mention. I wrote to her, and she told me that in her youth she too had fenced, and obviously enjoyed it. But then, Hilary is constantly surprising. Did you know she is president of the British Authors Cricket Club? Founded in 1892, it had Arthur Conan Doyle and P.G. Wodehouse playing for it, and now has Sebastian Faulks and Tom Holland and others. Hilary loves the game, loves its literature, and has read more books about cricket than Henry VIII had chancellors and wives combined. Did she actually play? Well, remember, cricket is like baseball, but without the fun. I asked her if she had been a demon bowler or attacking elegant bat. She said she would have been a lobster, meaning a player who bowled underarm, deceptively cunning, confusing the batter with trickery and awkward flight. That fits. Some years ago, I interviewed her before an audience at the Rose Theatre in West London. Every reply was perfectly phrased. No ums, ers, hesitations or deviations, just wonderfully interesting comments that could have been transcribed without any correction. But I suspect you all know that about her. A legacy in part of her studying law at university. She's written 11 novels, just 5 of them historical works, 2 collections of short stories, and one of the most moving memoirs I've ever read, Giving Up the Ghost, in 2003. She's also not afraid of getting into trouble. In a 2012 lecture, she dared criticise the Duchess of Cambridge as without quirks, without oddities, without the risk of the emergence of character. precision made. It created a flurry of headlines, leading her to quote her husband, saying she could kiss goodbye to a damehood. But the gods played fair, and in 2012, 2 years later, she became a dame. How could she not? Her mastery of detail, her sinuous prose, her sheer humanity and understanding of the human heart has meant that she's changed people's appreciation of Tudor times. She's done for Thomas Cromwell what Shakespeare did for Richard III, Henry IV, and Cleopatra. She has shaped history. Lewis Lapham tells me he's read each volume of the Cromwell trilogy 3 times, but the 3rd volume, The Mirror and the Light, he tossed aside 50 pages from the end, as he couldn't bear to experience Cromwell's death. I suspect he's far from being the only one. Sadly, Hilary Mantel can't be here tonight, much though she longed to be. Not least, she's moving house from Devon to Southern Ireland. I haven't mentioned her wonderful essays. In a collection of them, Mantel Pieces, she writes about a New England minister, John Williams, captured by Mohawks in 1703. She ends the piece, Williams wrote, "God can make dry bones, very dry, to live. So can historians. That must be their job." It has certainly been hers, triumphantly.
Good evening. I wish I could be with you in person to tell you how much this award means to me. When I began my novels about Thomas Cromwell, I didn't know there'd be a trilogy. And during those first 5 years of writing, my fear was always that I'd please no one, because it's very hard for a historical novelist to balance her efforts. The literary critic thinks, why is this text weighted with so much real-life detail? And the historian thinks, how could she bear to leave out all those battles, all those theological squabbles, all those legislative twists and turns? Well, I knew the peril, but I took courage. I pushed on with the project, and in the end, I did please a great many people. The books, and I think particularly the final novel, were by far the hardest thing I've ever done, and they took about 15 years out of my life. Actually, I don't regret a day of it, partly because they were the spur to so much creativity in other media. There was a TV series, and there will soon be a second. There were 3 stage plays, painting, a Thomas Cromwell tapestry in progress, and later this year there'll be the Wolf Hall picture book, a collection of photographs. But what pleased me most was that the books captured the attention of historians, and they led to rethinking and refocusing, and in due course that fed into new academic work. So this contact between the archive and the imagination has proved a productive one, and that is the ultimate reward for someone who's thought about the past for as long as she's been a sentient being. All my work has been an effort to show my readers that history is not a discrete discipline, separable from our ordinary lives. We live in history. We breathe it in and we breathe it out. As I record this, the news is dominated by Ukraine. But it's just one of many corrosive global conflicts based on clashes of interest and values that we must somehow resolve before we're destroyed. It's not enough to express horror. We must understand as well as denounce and recoil. We must think, and to think, we need context. And to have context, we need history. History at the center of our teaching and learning. I can't say that historians are better men and women than other people, but I don't claim either their expertise can save us. But I do believe the practice of history encourages the cardinal virtues, of which we're so much in need at present: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. But not too much temperance, not this evening. I hope you have a most enjoyable time. Thank you for honouring me with this prize. I'm truly grateful.
It's so sad that she can't hear us, and not because she's hard of hearing, but she's in London. But she is just amazing. So those of you that haven't read or seen Wolf Hall, hurry to it. It's just amazing. She's a living treasure. So our next performance comes from W.E.B. Du Bois, who my wife and I live essentially in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where he came from, and he is memorialized all over town, so it's lovely to find him here in New York. So this comes from his 1935 book, Black Reconstruction in America, and in particular from its last chapter, which was titled The Propaganda of History. Du Bois trained as an historian, though it's today somewhat better known for his work helping to found the NAACP in 1909. He became the organization's director of research and the founding editor of its magazine, which was called The Crisis, where he served for 24 years. Du Bois's words will be performed by the actor, director, and educator Reggie D. White.
Hello, thank you so much. It is an honor to read Du Bois's words, a man so brilliant he must have been described by his white contemporaries with the ultimate compliment of articulate. What are American children taught today about Reconstruction? An American youth attending college today would learn from current textbooks of history that the Constitution recognized slavery, that the chance of getting rid of slavery by peaceful methods was ruined by abolitionists, that after the period of Andrew Jackson, the two sections of the United States had become fully conscious of their conflicting interests. He would read that Harriet Beecher Stowe brought on the Civil War, that the assault on Senator Charles Sumner on the floor of the Senate was due to his coarse invective against a South Carolina senator, and that Negroes were the only people to achieve emancipation with no effort on their part. That Reconstruction was a disgraceful attempt to subject white people to ignorant Negro rule. In other words, he would in all probability complete his education without any idea of the part which the black race has played in America, of the tremendous moral problem of abolition, of the cause and meaning of the Civil War, and the relation which Reconstruction had to democratic government. Herein lies more than omission and difference of emphasis. The treatment of the period of Reconstruction reflects small credit upon American historians as scientists. We have too often a deliberate attempt to so change the facts of history that the story will make for pleasant reading for Americans. War, and especially civil strife, leave terrible wounds. It is the duty of humanity to heal them. It was therefore soon conceived as neither wise nor patriotic to speak of all the causes of strife and the terrible results which national differences in the United States had led. And so, first of all, we minimized the slavery controversy, which convulsed the nation from the Missouri Compromise down to the Civil War. On top of that, we passed by Reconstruction with a phrase of regret or disgust. But these are the reasons of courtesy and philanthropy. Are these reasons sufficient for denying the truth? If history is going to be scientific, if the record of human action is going to be set down with the accuracy and faithfulness of detail which will allow its use as a measuring rod and guidepost for the future of nations, then there must be set some standard of ethics in research and interpretation. If, on the other hand, we're going to use history for our pleasure and our amusement, for inflating our national ego and giving us a false but pleasurable sense of accomplishment, then we must give up the idea of history as science or as art, using the results of science, and admit that, frankly, we are using a version of historical fact in order to influence and educate the new generation along the way that we most wish. It's shocking that this is almost 100 years old. It is propaganda like this that has led men in the past to insist that history is lies agreed upon, and to point out the danger in such misinformation. It is indeed extremely doubtful if any permanent benefit comes to the world through such actions. Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. And shall we not be the best guide to humanity by telling the truth about all of this, so far as the truth is ascertainable? Here in the United States, we have a clear example. It was morally wrong and economically retrogressible to build human slavery into the United States in the 18th century. We know that now perfectly well. And there were many Americans, North and South, who knew this and said this in the 18th century. Moreover, it is not well to be reticent in describing our past. Our histories tend to discuss American slavery so impartially that in the end, nobody seems to have done any wrong and everybody was right. Slavery appears to have been thrust upon an unwilling, helpless America, while the South was blameless in becoming its center. The difference in development, North and South, is explained as a sort of working out of cosmic social and economic law. What was slavery in the United States? Just what did it mean to the owner and the owned? Shall we accept the conventional story of the old slave plantation and its owner's fine aristocratic, see, Reeve, what's with these words, Reeve? And I don't even have a staple. To its owner's fine aristocratic life of cultured leisure. One is astonished in the study of history at the recurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster was a drunk, but only remember that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer who liked beer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner, or that Thomas Jefferson had mulatto children, or that Alexander Hamilton had Negro blood, and simply remember the things that we regard as creditable and inspiring. The difficulty, of course, with this philosophy is that history loses its value as an incentive and example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. No one reading the history of the United States during 1850 and 1860 can have the slightest doubt left in their mind that Negro slavery was the cause of the Civil War. And yet, during and since, we learn that a great nation murdered thousands, destroyed millions on account of abstract doctrines concerning the nature of the federal union. This, then, is the book basis upon which today we judge Reconstruction, in order to paint the South as a martyr to inescapable fate, to make the North the magnanimous emancipator, and to ridicule the Negro as the impossible joke in the whole development. We have, in 50 years, by libel, innuendo, and silence, so completely misstated and obliterated the history of the Negro in America and his relation to its work and its government that today it is almost unknown. This may be fine romance, but it is not science. It may be inspiring, but it is certainly not the truth. And beyond this, it is dangerous. It is not only ideals, it has more than that, led the world to embrace and worship the color bar as social salvation. And it is helping to range mankind in ranks of mutual hatred and contempt at the summons of a cheap and false myth.
Well, that was just tremendous. Thank you so much. So, when we were, if I find my place again, when we were deciding which text to include in tonight's program, Lewis kept returning to W.H. Auden's 1938 poem, the Musée des Beaux Arts. Now, some of you reading the Times, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, will have seen a long peroration about this extraordinary painting, which I think is in Brussels, but I'm not certain. We're going to see it in a moment. Maybe it's up there now. Yes. Okay, well, it's an important thing. So I want to point out one little feature. Maybe you're all familiar with it, but it's the poem is about history and much, much more, and we're thrilled to have with us Rebecca Hall to read it tonight. But I just want to point out, well, Rebecca, she's highly talented actress, and last year made her directorial debut with the film Passing, which I know we saw at home, based on the novel by Nella Larson, which she wrote, directed, and produced. The painting that Auden refers to in the poem is Bruegel's Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, and it's what you're looking at in the screen in front of you. And as you know, the idea of the poem is that extraordinary things in history happen without many of the ordinary non-participants in that history being completely unaware of. And the classic is Icarus is falling from, his wings melting, flying too close to the sun. You can just see near the stern of that ship on the right-hand side a strange thing disappearing with a splash into the water, and that is Icarus's leg as he falls into the water, the sun having destroyed his chances of flying. So while the rest of life goes on merrily without any concern for an extraordinarily important moment in history. Well, Rebecca is going to read it to us now, so come on up wherever you are. Thank you so much. Great. Nice to see you.
About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away, quite leisurely from the disaster. The ploughman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone, as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green, and the expansive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to, and sailed calmly on.
Just beautiful, and I'm afraid one thinks that that kind of thing was probably happening north of Kiev 2 or 3 days ago when these terrible things were going on there. Now, our final reading, I think I've got it right, yes, of the night comes from the Oval Office. It's the morning of May the 13th, 1971, and the words are preserved on Richard Nixon's clandestine recording system. Assembled in the Oval Office are President Richard Nixon, the Assistant to the President for Domestic Affairs, John Ehrlichman, and the White House Chief of Staff, H.R. Haldeman. And I should parenthetically note at this time, I was the Guardian reporter in Washington at the time, and because Ehrlichman and Haldeman were such horrible people, I casually referred to them in a piece I wrote for the paper as the Teuton Macoute. And we got an official reprimand from Ron Ziegler, who was that ghastly, well, very smooth and nice-looking press secretary to Nixon, and we got an awful wigging, and he wanted the paper to remove me from Washington, but the paper was made of sterner stuff, and instead they removed Richard Nixon, which was... So anyway, it's about a year before the Watergate break-in that these and all of them organised. The war in Vietnam is ongoing, of course, and at the start of the month, May Day protests against the war in Washington led to the arrest of 12,000 people, the largest mass arrest in US history. I'm actually not quite sure that that's true, because the arrest of 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry took place in California, Oregon, and Washington, and a little bit of Arizona in 1941. So technically, that was a far bigger arrest than what happened in Washington. But however, let's deal for the moment with Washington. So inside the White House, when all these terrible things were going on, Mr. Nixon is concerned with another historic event, an episode of the television show All in the Family, starring, I believe, Mr. Bunker, I think that was his name. It had recently become the first sitcom to bring an openly gay man into America's living room. The gay rights movement was still getting off the ground in earnest, and the first pride parades had taken place the previous year. What you're about to hear is offensive, but the words are those of the 37th President of the United States. And we're not going to read here tonight the most offensive parts of the recording, which really aren't fit to be read aloud here or anywhere else. And this is a pretty tough crowd, but the kind of thing that Nixon said, even you couldn't be allowed to hear. But Nixon's words are, even if censored, worth reflecting on. In addition to Nixon's musings on history and decline, his belief that gay Americans should not be represented on television brings to mind Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which was signed into law just last Monday, and the ongoing repression of LGBTQ people in Russia, also a focus of Nixon's monologue. So playing President Nixon tonight is the justly celebrated actor Christopher Lloyd, and playing John Ehrlichman, one of the Teuton Macoute, the actor and loyal friend of Lapham's Quarterly, Alec Baldwin. So,
Do you want to play Nixon? No. Okay. Where is our, is it here? Do we have it here? You have it.
Yes.
I don't have it.
You don't have yours? Oh, dear.
It's Lapham's crowd. They expect you to memorize everything.
Not tonight.
Not tonight.
Okay, is that, I think that's, yeah, that's it.
Here we go. I can tell you right now. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Can you read that?
Yeah, that's good.
I was trying to tune into the goddamn baseball game on CBS. The game went off. The CBS came on with a show, and I'll be the damnedest thing I ever heard. Two magnificent, handsome guys and a stupid old fellow and a nice girl. They were glorifying homosexuality. I mean, the guys were admitting they were homosexuals and so forth. And I'm like, is this what people listen to?
What is it called? I haven't seen it.
Arch is the guy's name. But the point is, you can't imagine. For example, Arch is sitting here in his sloppy clothes, and here's this hippie son-in-law who's married to a screwball-looking daughter. And they said, Freddie or someone's coming home. Oh, you can't let him, the Arch said. I mean, you can't let him come in here. He's queer. And the hippie son-in-law says, no, he really isn't. And I think the son-in-law obviously apparently goes both ways. Likes the daughter and all the rest. So the guy comes in the door, but he comes in and he's obviously queer. He wears an ascot and so forth, and he uses the language, but he's not offensively so. And then Arch goes down to the local bar, and he's sitting around the bar, and Archie's best friend turns out to be a guy who, for 2 years, had played professional football as a linebacker. Now, this guy, his name is Freddie or something like that. God, he's handsome, virile, strong, and this and that. They're talking about this, and then this fairy comes into the bar. And the guy sees the fairy. Oh, how are you? And they shake hands and so forth. The bartender says, oh, Jesus, I hope you don't mind Freddie here, but I hope this other guy doesn't come back here. He could see what it was all about. He said, do you know him? And this virile guy says, yeah, well, go ahead, say it. Well, he says, of course, I didn't think that, and says Arch. And he says, it's true, Arch. It's true. How long have you known me? He said, 12 years, says Arch. And he says, have you ever seen me with a girl? Now, it's true. I turned the goddamn thing off. I couldn't listen to it anymore.
Now, that's real family entertainment, isn't it?
Well, but the point is, I do not mind the homosexuality. I understand that. But nevertheless, the point that I make is that, God damn it, I do not think that you glorify on television homosexuality. The reason you don't glorify it, John, any more than you glorify whores. And we all know people go to whores. And we all know that people just do that. We all have weaknesses and so forth and so on. But God damn it, what do you think that does to kids?
Yeah.
Oh, by God, I tell you, it outraged me. Not for any moral reason. Most people are outraged for moral reasons. Why? It outraged me because I don't want to see this country go that way. You ever see what happened? You know, what happened to the Greeks? Homosexuality destroyed them. Sure. Aristotle was a homo. We all know that, and so was Socrates.
But he never had the influence that television had.
Do you know what happened to the Romans? The last 6 Roman emperors were homos. The last 6. Nero had a public wedding to a boy. Yeah, you know that. You know what happened to the popes. It's all right that popes were laying nuns. That's been going on for years. Centuries. But But when the popes from the Catholic Church went to hell in, I don't know, 3 or 4 centuries ago, it was homosexual. And finally, it had to be cleaned out.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's what happened to Britain. It happened earlier to France. And let's look at the strong societies, the Russians. God damn it, they root them out. They don't let them around at all. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't know what they do with them.
Yeah.
Now, what are we allowing in this country when we allow dope? Do you think Russians allow dope? Hell no. Now, if they can allow, not if they can catch it, they send them up, you see. Homosexuality, dope, immorality in general, these are the enemies of strong societies. That's why the communists and the left-wingers are pushing this stuff. They're trying to destroy us.
Oh, sure. It's fatal liberality.
Huh?
It's fatal liberality. And with its use on television, it has such leverage.
You know what happened in California.
San Francisco has just gone clear over.
But it's not just the ratty part of town. The upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove, which I attended from time to time, it's the most faggy goddamn thing you could ever imagine. With that San Francisco crowd, I can't shake hands with anybody from San Francisco. Decorators. They got to do something, but we don't have to glorify. You know, one of the reasons fashions have made women look so terrible is because the goddamn designers hate women. Designers taking it out on women. Now they're trying to get more sexy things coming on again.
Hot pants.
Jesus Christ.
Thank heavens, not for little girls, but for Richard Nixon. So thank you to both of you, and indeed for all the performers who volunteered their time and talent this evening to breathe new life into the words of the past. So join me one last time in thanking Bob Balaban, Alec Baldwin, Reeve Carney, Rebecca Hall, Richard Kind, Christopher Lloyd, Morgan Spector, and Reggie White. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you so much. And thanks also to my old friend Richard Cohen, who helped arrange this evening, for introducing Hilary Mantel. Richard, I should mention, author of a marvellous new book that's very apropos to our programme, Making History, the Storytellers Who Shaped the Past, which is just about to come out here. It was out in Britain 2 or 3 weeks ago. Wonderful reviews there. I hope the same thing will happen here. But to conclude, I want to raise my glass to our performers, yes, but also and particularly to dear Lewis Lapham and to Lapham's Quarterly, to all of the supporters of tonight's event. Cheers, and thank you very much indeed. And with that, I'm going to say good night to all of you. Thank you for being here and for your support of Lapham's Quarterly. Good night. Safe home.